Hello there. Here's the campaign director for Rupert Lowe's Restore Britain movement, speaking at a New Culture Forum Locals event in Southampton, and he's up for the fight. Here's Charlie Downs.
Well, hello everybody. It's a certain type of person who comes out on a 30-degree Saturday in July to talk about the intricacies of saving our country. But I am very thankful for you all coming out and being here because there's a lot of people having conversations like the ones that we have in this country, up and down the country. I have the privilege of attending some of these meetings and knowing a lot of these people. And there's an increasing appetite for something truly radical, I think, in this country. And I'm always heartened to see so many people coming out who are concerned enough to come out on a day like today to talk about these things. So, thank you. I want to start by talking about one of my favourite bands. It's a little-known indie band called Oasis. You may not have heard of them. Now, I have the great privilege of going to see Oasis later this month, which I'm very excited for. I've been listening to Oasis since I was a boy. My dad played them for me when I was growing up, and so I've got a real sentimental attachment to that band and their sound and their vibe. And a friend of mine who's about 15 years older than me, I was born in 2001, so I really saw the tail end of Oasis's, first part of their career. A friend of mine, about 15 years older than me, who saw Oasis in the 90s when they were actually at their absolute peak, said something to me recently that really stuck with me. And that was that when everyone in the 90s was listening to Oasis and singing along to, Wonderwall and that sort of thing, and in the pub and in clubs and all that sort of thing, people felt like they were at the beginning of something. They felt like there was a renewed optimism in Britain. But what my friend said to me actually was that the truth of the matter was that they were at the end of something. And that Oasis and what they represented, the sound and the vibe and the sentiment, the spirit that they embodied, it was actually the kind of final last legs of that. And I think that's proven to be the case, because in the intervening 20 to 30 years, this country has transformed completely. Now, I've only ever known this country as what it is today, which is to say a multicultural economic zone without much in the way of identity. Insofar as identity is allowed, it's these very abstract ideas of British values as enshrined in law by Michael Gove in 2015, things like tolerance and democracy and the rule of law, and these high-minded ideals that I think we can probably all get behind, but which actually don't constitute a real identity. They don't provide, certainly young people, with a sense of belonging and a sense of home and a sense of purpose in this country. It's the kind of thing that could be taught off of a PowerPoint slide in a corporate seminar. Another thing about Oasis that I think is just so crucial to understand, and I recognise it's maybe a silly example, but I think they actually do represent this very well. They're so distinctly English. There's such a distinctive English feeling to Oasis, in my opinion. The optimism, the energy. There's a great story of Liam Gallagher talking about Nirvana's Kurt Cobain, and he sort of said, he doesn't have time for any of that dreary, miserable, suicidal nonsense, and instead it's champagne supernova or whatever else. And I love that, because it's such an that is the English spirit. We are optimistic, and we are energised, or at least we used to be. And it's that particularity of Englishness and English identity that I have really felt, has come in my own life into sharp relief over the last few years. Because, as I said, I was born in the early 2000s, didn't think much of my upbringing at the time, didn't think it was particularly unique, enjoyed it. I was very, very lucky. I was fairly standard middle-class upbringing, spent my weekends at National Trust sites and English heritage castles and going to walks on the beach and all that sort of stuff, holidays in Cornwall, eating roast dinners and scones and all the rest of it. These cliched, stereotypical English things. But in the last few years, I've been looking back at my childhood and the great gift that my parents gave me in that upbringing. And it's taken on a political character for me, if that makes any sense, because I can see clearly right now that the power structure that governs this country, so not just the public-facing elected element of government that we deal with in the House of Commons, but every arm of it, from the media to the universities to the unelected component of government, constituting about 500,000 people in the civil service, to the entertainment industry, the NGO sort of complex, all of these different centres of power in Britain seem to have made it their mission to destroy English identity. Whether knowingly or not, that seems to be the revealed preference of the power structure that currently governs this country. And anybody who speaks out about that, anybody who raises concerns and seeks to represent the interests of the English community is branded all of the words that I imagine we're all very familiar with. Racist, bigot, all the rest of it. Don't need to get into that. And so, as I've watched my heritage and my ancestral homeland be systematically transformed in the image of what the likes of Blair want to see, a propositional nation that's founded on values that anybody can come to and anybody can be a part of, where diversity and multiculturalism are held up as the highest good, and inclusion and tolerance are the highest imaginable virtues. That project, in my opinion, has failed. It's over. The conversation is done. It doesn't work. This program that's been brought through over the course of my lifetime doesn't work. So what I want to talk to you about today is two things. First, I want to talk about where that program came from, and the second is I want to talk about what we have to do now. So I think that this ideology that has absolutely taken over the power structure that governs this country, because as a quick aside, most ordinary people you talk to, they don't believe any of this nonsense. You talk to people in the pub or just on the street. Like I walk my dog every morning, and from time to time, you do just strike up conversation with a stranger. It's a very English thing, that kind of community, neighbourly spirit, and I love that. And you will sometimes get onto the topic of the condition of the country, and nobody thinks that this has worked. Nobody thinks that mass immigration has been a good thing. Nobody thinks that this kind of rainbow flag-waving ideology of tolerance and inclusion is a good thing. They worry about what this country will look like when their children are their age and when their grandchildren are their age. I know I do. I mean, in the year 2063, the white British are set to be a minority in this country, an ethnic minority, in their own ancestral homeland. That's my children. That's my grandchildren. That's my great-grandchildren. That's terrifying to me. And obviously, I will also myself still be alive, God willing, at that point. But that's the situation that we're staring down the barrel of. And I think that this ideology finds its roots in the aftermath of the Second World War. As so many things do in the modern kind of paradigm, the Second World War is really the foundational myth of our society. And rightly, in the face of the events of the middle of the previous century, the generation that came after the war, the boomers, were racked with fear, with these visions of fascism and war and genocide, and again, rightly, went way in the other direction. And everything evil was embodied in the figure of Hitler: intolerance, hierarchy, ruthless in-group preference, oppression, crushing of dissent, and all these bad things, right? But what they did with that, and what happened, I think, as a natural reaction to the destruction that caused, was they placed virtue on the opposites of those values. So out-group preference, endless tolerance, limitless self-expression held up as the highest moral good. This finds we see the one of the clearest manifestations of this in the culture of the 1960s, the kind of, don't judge me, man, peace and love, drugs, free sex, all that kind of stuff, which at the time, I mean, I'm sure it was a lot of fun, right? But actually the society that has created, the culture that doctrine has created, has left young people like me completely rootless and completely without identity and searching for a source of purpose in the world. And the power structure that governs us now has totally embraced and absorbed that way of living. And we are taught from the earliest age that fulfillment and satisfaction is to be found in the pursuit of a limitless self-expression and individualism, fundamentally. Meaning and purpose are to be found within myself rather than with other people. And so I don't think it's any surprise that we now have, particularly in the aftermath of the COVID lockdowns, I don't think it's any surprise that we have this incredibly insular, atomized culture now, this atomized society where people are less and less interested with things like community. I mean, we hear these strange lip service paid to the idea of community in the language of the government. We hear about the Muslim community or the black community or the LGBT community or whatever else. All these kind of communities that are not really communities. They're just groups of people. Like a community is a group of people in the same place with the same values, who speak the same language and with the same ideas of what they would want to see happen in their local area, right? I don't think that's a controversial idea. But that is increasingly disappearing because of the program that has been brought through this country. And so young people are looking elsewhere for a sense of community. And the left are seeking to answer that question in the form of woke ideology. They try and push these identities like sexuality and race and sex and all that sort of thing as a source of meaning for young people. And again, it's an expression of what I just mentioned, that idea of limitless self-expression. It's from that the 1 million genders come, and the infinite pronouns and all the rest of it.
Absolutely.
And I think a lot of that stuff now is in the rearview mirror. I think we've passed peak woke, but I do think it still has a hold on a lot of young people because the right, people of a conservative mind and a patriotic mind, are not actually offering their own answer to that question. And that, I think, is what we need to do. Because I'll give you some statistics. So for those of you not familiar with my work, I write for the Daily Mail from time to time. And some of the things I've written about are it's the disaffection that young people feel in this country. I wrote about the fact, for example, that half of under 30s do not have faith in democracy. They don't believe in democracy as a viable system of government. And who can blame us? I count myself among that 50% because look at what democracy is delivering us in this country.
Nothing.
Record high house prices, stagnating wages, mass immigration, demographic displacement, unaffordable energy on the altar of this harebrained net zero agenda. And that is that's the goods, the bill of goods that we're given as a result of the system that we have in this country. The type of person that democracy seems to select for are the leaders that I have lived under for my whole life. They're people who are good at winning elections. That's the kind of person democracy selects for. It sounds silly, but it's true. It's the kind of person who is prepared to tell the crowd what they want to hear, the kind of person who is prepared to take money from moneyed interests and then, serve the agenda of those moneyed interests. And that does not a good society make. That does not produce good leaders. And that's not to say that I'm against democracy in principle, because I'm not. Because I think representation, there's nothing more important than representation when it comes to leadership. People need to feel as though they have a voice. And not just feel as though, people need to have a voice. Ordinary people need to feel as though the power structure that governs them and their country is acting in their interests. And I don't think there's ever been a time in this country during my lifetime where that has broadly been the case. I think a lot of people for the last 30 years have felt completely disconnected from what goes on in Westminster. And I think that's quite understandable because, spending time there as I do, everything that people think goes on in those halls of power is basically true. It's a big club and we're not in it. The culture of that place is just, it's unbelievable, really. So that's democracy. Another statistic I'd like to throw at you is the fact that 41% of under 30s wouldn't fight for this country, wouldn't take up arms for this country under any circumstances, including invasion, pretending for a moment that isn't happening in the English Channel. What does that say? What does that say about how this country is failing to serve the interests of young people? So many of my peers and my friends want to leave. They want to move elsewhere. And why wouldn't they? Again, house prices are now 10 times the average wage. It's not possible to own a house unless you're, in a couple, which maybe is, in a backwards kind of way might make it a good thing because it's going to force young people to go towards a more traditional, sort of early marriage and that sort of thing. But anyway, wages are stagnating. GDP per capita has essentially flatlined since 2008. Whereas GDP as a whole has grown. But who has that benefited? Well, it hasn't benefited us. Doesn't seem to benefit us it doesn't seem like it will benefit us in the near future. We look at our high streets and they're boarded up, and where they're not boarded up, it's some eclectic combination of these weird sort of third world looking vape shops and Turkish barbers and all the rest of it, or it's American chains like McDonald's or Starbucks or Subway. You know, it was one of the most bizarre experiences of my life. You know, when I started to actually explore this country a bit more as I got older, especially when I went to university, to notice that basically every high street in this country just looks the same. It's just like a carbon copy of everyone. And yet you'll go into, you know, one thing I love about Wetherspoons is the fact that the local Wetherspoons will always have photos in there of what this town looked like 100 years ago. I love that, because you go into these places and you can look at these photos and you can see that each town and village had their own distinct identity. They had a trade, an industry that made them unique, and it gave them a unique texture. But now you walk around these places and they're just, you know, generic, kind of managed carbon copies of one another. And once again, that does not provide the people living there with a sense of pride or place or identity. And so once again, young people with the means want to leave. I wrote an article recently about this incident that happened at Glastonbury with this Bob Vylan character. Now, the thing that the media pounced on was his chants of death to the IDF. Now, you know, whatever you think of what's going on in Israel and Gaza, I myself, geopolitics isn't my area. I don't think that it benefits Britain by being involved in any way in that stuff. But whatever you think, calling for murder on a stage that large is probably not, it's not a great idea. It's pretty, it's pretty gross. But the thing that the media didn't pick up on was one of Bob Vylan's songs. And the lyrics of this song are, I heard you want your country back, shut the F up, right? And what I wrote about in my piece was the fact that the you that he was referring to when he said, I heard you want your country back, was us. It was the English, the indigenous peoples of these isles, right?
Gavins.
Yes, indeed, exactly. Because a lot of people suggested that he was talking to Reform UK voters or Brexit voters, and I think, you know, he probably was, but actually at a deeper level, he was recognising a group identity that he didn't feel himself to belong to. Bob Vylan was born in Britain. What's his actual name? Pascal Robinson Foster. It's a nice, nice working class name for you there. He was born in Britain, and he is, I believe, half English. I think his mother is English. And yet he's still using language like, I heard you want your country back. He clearly doesn't recognise himself as being part of this community. And that therefore begs the question, well, who does he speak for when he says that? And who is he to say that we are to shut the F up for wanting sovereignty and control over our own homeland? You know, it's just ridiculous. But that was permitted and it was broadcast by the BBC. And so that brings me to the second part of my talk today, which is where we go from here. Because it is not wrong to want our country back. It has been taken from us. And anybody who tells you that you're somehow wrong or racist or whatever for believing that is basically just trying to gaslight you. They're trying to convince you not to believe the evidence of your own senses when you walk around this country and you speak to other people who, you know, recognise the same reality that we do, that this country is going to the dogs. And in so many different ways, it is being taken from us. So, that is why, just under 2 weeks ago, myself and a certain MP by the name of Rupert Lowe, independent MP for Great Yarmouth, we launched an organisation called Restore Britain. So we are not a political party, we are a movement. We exist above the fray of party politics because it's obvious to me that another party is just the last thing we need. It's not a viable vehicle for the kind of radical change that we need in this country, but rather a centre of gravity to unite everybody thinking seriously about the future of this country and who are concerned about the economic, political, social and cultural and even spiritual condition of these islands. We are seeking to be the home of those people. And we've already had tremendous success. I mean, we have thousands and thousands of paying members, £20 a year, sign up now, who are, you know, we're already having these conversations about what we do next. Because I think a lot of people place their faith in either Reform UK or the Conservative Party. And personally, you know, I've been involved with Reform for a number of years. I remain a member, but I look at those two offerings and I just don't see it. In either one, I do not see a viable party of government. I do not see a viable vehicle for the kind of radical change that we want to see. And so the role of Restore Britain, what we're trying to do, is apply pressure to those parties and say, look, we represent your natural voting constituency. We represent the interests of the people who would volunteer for you, who would be possibly even candidates for you, and who would vote for you at a general election if only you adopt the kind of programme that we are pushing for. And the kind of policies that we're going to be drafting, because we are, part of what we're going to be doing is actually producing policy papers that any party is welcome to pick up and use. Some of the policies are mass deportation of illegal migrants, reversing mass immigration, ending this, the net zero craziness that's making it so impossibly expensive for people to live, banning halal and kosher slaughter, because these practices do not have any place in Britain. They have no business. We're a country with a proud history of protecting animal rights. And I think one of the things that sets the English apart from the rest of the world is the concern that we place on the way we treat our animals. It's a mark of civilization. And so the fact that these things are going on in our country, it's a stain on our history, which is to say nothing of the other stains that we have sustained over the last 30 years. The terrorism, the grooming gangs, the murders, all of these things that are the natural, inevitable end result of the programme that our government has sought to impose upon us during that period. So, as I say, we are going to be drafting these policies, uniting people who feel the same way as we do, applying pressure to the parties that would be our natural vehicle and would be the natural vehicle for these ideas, and hoping to restore Britain. And I'll tell you a little bit about why we chose that name. Because it's an idea, it's one of these words that's been flying around for a little while. Dr. David Starkey, who I'm sure you'll all be familiar with, has been talking about restoration for a number of years. And I think that is the right framing. Because Britain right now is like an old country house or a great work of art or something that has just been left to rot and ruin. And it is possible to bring a great country house or a piece of great art back into, to make it vibrant and living once again. And that process is called restoration. You restore the art, you restore the property, and in the same way, we're recognizing the fact that this is a great country. It is the greatest country on earth when it is governed correctly and governed by the right people with the right ideas. We are unmatched on the world stage for, in my opinion, along all metrics: quality of life, comfort, a sense of strong identity, a ferocity in our national spirit that we are a calm, collected, and kind of cozy people in good times, but when times are bad, we are absolutely formidable.
Exceptional.
Yes. And so restoring Britain means actually remembering who we are as a people and kind of shedding away this nonsense of progressivism and liberalism and diversity and multiculturalism, sort of getting it off of ourselves like it's some kind of, it's like a cage, it's like a straitjacket, and it's keeping us imprisoned psychologically and spiritually. And what we're trying to do, what restoring Britain means, is escaping that straitjacket and remembering who we are as a people. Thank you very much.